The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When some were speaking about the temple, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God, Jesus said, "As for these things that you see, the days will come when not one stone will be left upon another. All will be thrown down." They asked him, "Teacher, when will this be? And what will be the sign that this is about to take place?" And Jesus said, "Beware that you are not led astray. For many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and the time is near. Do not go after them. When you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified. For these things must take place first, but the end will not follow immediately." Then Jesus said to them, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There'll be great earthquakes, and in various places famines and plagues. And there will be dreadful portents and great signs from heaven. But before all this occurs, they will arrest you and persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogues and prisons, and you'll be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will give you an opportunity to testify. So make up your minds not to prepare your defense in advance, for I will give you words and a wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. You'll be betrayed even by parents, by brothers and sisters, and by relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. You will be hated by all because of my name, but not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance, you will gain your souls." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise you, Lord Jesus Christ.
It's so good to see all of you today. I've been away for a couple of weekends in Toronto for work, so it's nice to be back with you. In 2010, Linda and I, my wife, went to Jerusalem. We were at the base of the Western Wall, commonly referred to as the Wailing Wall. The Western Wall is actually a part of the foundation of the temple that was built in 500 BC, 500 years before Christ. At the time of Christ, the temple was the center of Jewish religion. It was there that devout Jews came at least once a year to make sacrifices for their sins and to restore them to a right relationship with God. They believed that God himself dwelt in the temple, in a chamber known as the Holy of Holies. The enormous size of the stones of the temple, the beauty of it, and the fact that God had ordained it made the temple seem indestructible. In today's gospel, we read, while some people were speaking about how the temple was adorned with costly stones and votive offerings, Jesus stood up and said, "All that you see here, the days will come when there will not be left one stone upon another stone that will not be thrown down." Jesus was prophesying that in just a few years the temple would be destroyed. Sadly, only a few listened and took action based on this prophecy. And in AD 70, which is about 35 years after Jesus was crucified, the Romans retaliated against an attempted Jewish uprising and destroyed the temple. They obliterated the temple. And today there is a tunnel that goes down to the level of the marketplace at the time of Christ. And that was really cool for us to be at the same level as the marketplace, knowing that Jesus would have walked through the marketplace on his way to the temple. And there, in the middle of what was once the market, is one of the large stones that made up the temple. It was rectangular in shape, perfectly carved, about the size of a school bus. Just one stone. They used the stones from the temple to destroy the marketplace because they wanted to destroy the Jewish society. And sadly, it's estimated that 1 million Jews died in that revolt. And you can imagine the size of that number at the time of Christ. In today's gospel, Jesus predicts the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem and also tells about the signs that will occur upon his return to earth at the end of time. St. Luke records that Jesus says, "Beware that you are not led astray." If only his listeners had heeded his words. The question I would like to pose today is, are we being led astray in our time? What about what is currently happening in healthcare in Nova Scotia? Sadly, Christian ethics, which was the very basis of Canadian healthcare, has been replaced by a very utilitarian view of the human person in which our only worth is in what we can do or produce. Last week we heard from both priests about the immense dignity of the human person created in the image and likeness of God. The very power of God that dwelt in the temple now dwells within our hearts. Yet even with that tremendous dignity that God has given us, our healthcare system devalues the human person. Euthanasia, or medical assistance in dying, has in 9 short years come to be seen as a compassionate treatment for people who are said to have lost their God-given dignity. The main lobby group for MAID in Canada is a group called Dying with Dignity. And that title assumes that a person can lose their dignity if they lose their control of bodily functions, or if they're elderly, or if they're ill, or if they're lonely or isolated. According to that narrative, at a certain point, the human person loses their dignity, and at that point, it is acceptable to end their lives. MAID has been seen as a solution to economic and social problems. Here are 2 examples of what I mean. In Nova Scotia, doctors are required to offer MAID to patients even if the patient does not ask for it. So we had a recent case at the Cape Breton Regional Hospital in Sydney where a woman with disabilities went in to have a mastectomy and then another mastectomy just for preventative reasons. But during those 2 interactions, she was offered MAID 3 times. We recently had a call from a young mother, self-employed, the sole support for her family. Her husband has severe rheumatoid arthritis, unable to work. She's supporting him and 2 young children. She has everything to live for. But when she went to prepare for her surgery for a tumor on her optic nerve, she was given information, and in that information there was a 1-page description of how she could access MAID. She herself told us about how she had a friend with ALS who she accompanied her as she passed, and she said over 10 times she was offered MAID in our hospital facilities. Imagine how that feels to be a patient who is hoping to be able to live and to have your doctor offer you death. It would be quite discouraging, and one would be tempted just to give up. The second thing that's happening in Nova Scotia is that doctors and nurse practitioners are required to fill out a form and sign it and send it in to the Department of Health asking for their patients to be assessed for MAID. Did you know that in 95% of cases, people who apply for MAID are approved? So doctors who are Catholic are in a horrible dilemma. The Catholic Church teaches that, morally speaking, making a referral or providing access to MAID for a patient is morally the same as actually doing the lethal injection. So what are our doctors supposed to do? They're obligated to provide this referral, and they cannot do it according to their faith. To do so would be to choose their career over their faith in Christ. And so right now, we have identified 42 doctors, and there's probably many more, who are waiting for the next complaint from the college, knowing that they would likely be disciplined and could even lose their license. This in a time of great doctor shortage. Previously, what they were doing is they were giving the patient the 1-800 number, and the patient was contacting the Department of Health on their own, and the Department of Health provided them with an assessor. It's a system that's in place that can provide MAID for anyone in the province, no matter where you live. So our doctors would simply give them the number, and they would make the contact. But now what's happening is the government has cut that off. And so if a patient calls up the Department of Health, asks for an assessment, they say, "Do you have a doctor?" And if they say yes, then they say, "You must go back to your doctor and get a referral from them." So this is only adding to the burden of people who are in crisis at end of life. Meanwhile, if you don't have a doctor, then you can have access to an assessment. Now, I've been talking about this with you for over a year. And as I mentioned, many doctors of faith are now worried about getting a complaint that could end their medical career if they follow their conscience. And the sad reality is for some of our young doctors, they don't want to get a disciplinary note on their file, because that would make it difficult for them to transfer to the United States or to another province in Canada. So what many are saying is, we need to think about leaving now before we get the complaint. Now, we have contacted the government. We have sent something like 3,500 letters to the provincial government. We know that these letters are in the Premier's office, but the Premier has opted not to act up until this point, perhaps because of concerns about political fallout on behalf of the people who are in favor of MAID. Now, when I spoke about this last year, some of our supporters told me that what they were hearing from the parishioners is the parishioners just couldn't believe that this was the situation. And I'm sure many of you find it hard to believe, but it is actual fact. But the Jews at the time of Jesus, they couldn't believe that the temple would one day be destroyed. We are so ingrained to believe that Canada is a country that respects differences, pluralism, that we have religious freedom and conscience. Actually, all of these things are enshrined in our Constitution, right? We've been to court, and we've lost because you may not realize it, but the rights that you have in the Canadian Constitution are only as good as when they can be justified in a court. And the judges are able to take away our rights and to say that it is justified to infringe on people's religious freedom. So believe it, it is happening. In today's gospel, Jesus speaks about the day when he will come back to earth at the end of time so that he can judge the living and the dead. He said that there would be a great time of persecution before that. We are being persecuted now. I was visiting my favorite bakery on Friday, and the Muslim lady that runs it told me the following. She said, "I've noticed a change in the culture in Nova Scotia in the past few years. People are starting to call bad things good and good things bad." She said, "This is what is supposed to happen before the Messiah returns." That's today's gospel. She said, "We all need a pinch to wake up. Later she added, maybe what we need is a punch. Consider yourself punched. When Jesus returns, will we be awake? Will we be about his business to witness and fight for the value of each human being? Or will we just carry on with a business-as-usual attitude and go with the flow until someone we love becomes a made statistic because of their disability, because they're frail and elderly, because they have a chronic condition, because they're on the autism spectrum, or because they have a mental health concern? Made has gone too far, and we should not let it overcome the Christian values that our society was built on. Now, many of you, despite the teachings of the church, probably still think that made is mercy killing. You might even think, well, it's justified in some circumstances. But I want to demonstrate for you that what we've done is we've allowed a great evil into our society. And with all evil, while it seems innocent at first, it has now grown out of control, like Pandora's box. And we will all have to work extremely hard just to try to limit it. It's like the camel that poked his nose under the tent. And then before you knew it, you were sharing your tent with a whole camel. So I'm going to be giving 2 talks. I've been giving these all over the province with the support of our Archbishop and the Bishop of Antigonish. I'm going to give 2 talks here in Metro, one on Monday, November the 24th at 7 p.m. at St. Ignatius in Bedford. That's Monday, November 24th at 7 p.m. at St. Ignatius. And Wednesday, the November 26th, here at St. Thomas More in the afternoon at 2 p.m. We decided to put something in the afternoon because I know some people don't like to go out at night when it's so dark. And the title of these talks are What's Wrong with MAID? And I want you to come even if you support MAID, because you need to hear the implications and how it is being implemented in Canada. In case you didn't get the times, the notice will be in the Parish in our diocesan bulletin next weekend. I also have letters to the Premier that I've spread throughout the church. If you're concerned about this, I ask you to sign one of these letters. At last night's Mass, we gathered 70 letters, which I was really appreciative of. And for those of you in the back, there might not be enough letters at the back, so just come forward. There are some in the pews here, and there are also some at the back door. But I really encourage you to sign that letter, because the Premier needs to know that there is a large segment of the Nova Scotia population who feels that MAID has gone too far. Because if he doesn't hear that from us, he will just not take any action. We hired a consulting firm to help us get our message out. We met with them this week. And the consultant said to me something that I already knew too well. She said, many religious people agree with you, Larry, but they would never make their voice heard. For some reason, Catholics and Christians in Nova Scotia are very quiet about how they feel. And as a result, if you're the Premier and you've got Dying with Dignity who are very good at sending you emails and hounding you about a particular topic on the one side, and you've got all these Christians on the other side who will not say boo, then you are more likely to listen to the Dying with Dignity crowd than you are to listen to the other side. We need to speak up. How long will we let this go? How long will we allow our hospitals to become places where patients are killed and that's considered treatment? What will you do when you are weak and vulnerable and lying in a hospital bed? Politicians no longer worry about right and wrong, but only about getting elected. Why should our elected leaders stick their neck out to criticism if we are not willing to stick our neck out as well and to stand up for the truth? We need to speak out about these concerns to protect vulnerable people from a premature death. And this is the most important social justice issue that's happening in Canada right now. When the Lord comes back, when the Lord comes back, do you want to be just keeping your head down and not getting involved? Or do you want him to see you actually caring for the vulnerable and looking after them? Now, this action might lead to you being controversial or even perhaps criticized by some of your friends, but it will for sure lead to being a Christian witness and imitating Christ himself. It is time for all of us to wake up and take action. God bless you.